All right, hi everyone. So today we're going to do a video about spooky stories or scary stories or some kind of stories. And we're gonna tell them.
Yep.
So I'm gonna be telling the story. It's about a set of twins referred to as the silent twins. It's a kind of spooky story about their relationship and everything that happened to them in their life. And I learned about it first on the podcast Supernatural with Ashley Flowers. So if you're interested in learning more about it and actually hearing the more accurate story, because I'm sure mine will not be, but if you're looking to actually hear the actual story, it's Supernatural with Ashley Flowers. Stephanie, what will you be telling us today?
I am doing this story about the Zodiac Killer, who was a killer back in the late 1960s in California. I found him on biography.com. The interesting thing about him is that they don't know who he is. And to this day,
Right.
people have claimed that they know, but there's no proof.
Who could it be? We don't know. It could be your dad. We don't know.
Oh, I hope not.
Okay, so I'll start and tell you my story about the silent twins. So basically, Jennifer and June, when they were born, they were obviously, like most twins, super close. Well, these two twins were a little bit odd because since they were very, very young, they refused to talk to anybody. But the doctor told it's pretty normal for twins to start communicating a little later with other people. So they were like, okay, not that big a deal. Well, they started school, and all the way up until, I think it was the second grade, they basically wouldn't talk to anybody. They didn't even talk to each other in public. So they were just completely silent, never said anything. If they did say anything, it was just one or two words, and that was the most that anybody could get out of them. When they were around 8 years old, their dad is like freaking out because he's literally never heard them say a single word. So they have not said anything at all to their dad. They'll talk to their mother to say like one or two words at a time. They have a younger sibling that they'll kind of talk to, but they will not talk to anybody else in the whole family, anybody else they ever come in contact with. They're just completely silent. So at first people started thinking like, oh, maybe, they just can't talk, like they have a speech impediment or something. So they're going to speech therapy. They start sending them to counselors and different people, but they can't get anything out of them. They won't say anything. What basically got them to the point where people were like, this is not normal, is they ended up having to get vaccines at their school. And the doctor who did it said that when he gave them the vaccine, they didn't even flinch. It was basically like they were zombies. They had no reaction whatsoever. It really just had that strong of an effect on him that he was like, no, this is like really not normal.
Yeah.
And they actually got weirder to the point where they started doing everything in sync, like everything. They would march one person in front of the other in complete synchronization. They would move their arms exactly the same. Everything was exactly the same. A teacher actually followed them home one day to see like maybe it was just like a show.
Yeah.
And they said the whole way home, they didn't break their synchronization for like even a second. They would even do this when they were eating, when they were going to the bathroom, anything. They would not leave each other's side, and they would do everything at the complete exact same time. They would obviously do it very slowly so they could keep everything, which made it even creepier to everybody else. It just got weirder and weirder as time went on. Eventually, I think they got to be in like high school, and their dad kind of was like getting weirded out still. So he would like kind of try to, listen at their room. And he said that he could hear them talking, but it didn't sound like English or normal talking. Some people even said that it was like they would speak English, but they would speak it so quickly that you couldn't understand what they were saying. So it just kept getting weirder and weirder for everybody involved. So eventually the school, they're trying to like help them out, and these girls really like journaling and stuff, and they write a lot. So they're communicating to them through writing. And what they found out is basically these girls kind of made like a pact that they would just not talk. But I think like as they grew up, they didn't know how to stop doing that. They didn't want to be the one who stopped doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
So eventually the school was like, we have to get involved, we have to do something. And what they decide to do to try to help them is to try separating them. Like, maybe if they're away from each other, they can kind of find themselves and deal with themselves. They're about to separate them, and their therapist gets a call, this phone call, and it's like completely silent. And then He said that all of a sudden, in like this voice that was so quick, like he could barely catch it, they were just like, this is the twins. If you don't separate us, then we'll start talking next week. And he was like, whoa, like we just heard them talking, like maybe that actually is like a step forward. But then of course, like the next week came, they still didn't say anything. So they're like, okay. So when they do actually get them separated, they basically just go into like this catatonic state. Like they will not move, they won't say anything. Like at one point they said that they had to like pick them up and carry them from place to place. Eventually, like as they're growing, they're starting to really like hate each other. Another thing to note is that they never referred to each other as basically separate entities. They would just call each other interchangeably Jay. But basically, like the more people looked into it and tried to like help them out, they kind of said that they felt that June was the good twin and Jennifer was the bad twin. Like one instance, they said that they were talking to the girls and trying to get them to talk, and they said that they could see June just really wanting to say something, but then they just felt like Jennifer was stopping her. Like she didn't move, she didn't say anything, but they said that they just felt like she was stopping her somehow from saying anything. So as the story goes on, these girls start to kind of act out. Basically what happens is they start doing drugs and drinking and partying. Jennifer actually loses her virginity. And so this was like a big deal to them because they were like completely the same in every single way, but then she lost her virginity. And this just kind of sends everything just spiraling even more. As they're like, you know, getting into these bad habits, they actually end up trying to either kill each other or like they'll just go after each other. At one point, they just went after each other so fiercely. Everyone was like, they're trying to kill each other. Mm-hmm. And then when they pulled them apart, they said they both just went completely limp. Eventually, June got to the point where she was just like overwhelmed. So they go for this walk, and June actually tries to kill her sister, throws her off this bridge into this water. Then after she throws her off the bridge, she then sees Jennifer's not dead. So she jumps into the water and then tries to continue trying to drown her. And then all of a sudden, June just stops trying to kill her sister, pulls her out of the water, saves her life, and just says, I love you. And then Jennifer says, I love you too. And then they walk home. After all this is going on, they're literally like losing their minds being together. But every time they would try to be separated, they would just be so like lonely. So they ended up escalating their like crimes. And every time they would do something a little bit worse, they would then call the police and pretend to either be someone else or like not really say who they were, and basically just report their crimes. It wasn't like bad enough to really prosecute them.
Yeah.
They just kept escalating and escalating until finally they end up just burning this building down. So they burn this building to the ground. The police come, they find them totally red-handed, they caught them. So then they end up getting charged and they go to jail, which does not go well. What ends up happening is they start doing all these little really self-destructive things. They do this pact, like it's like kind of a starvation pact where they will each only eat every other day. So they ended up just getting so sick and they were just like basically killing themselves. So after a while, they try separating them again. Same kind of thing where they just really freak out. But what they said is while they were separated, they were still completely in sync. So they would be on separate sides of like the prison. They would be reading at the same time, sleeping at the same time. Everything they were doing was still completely in sync. Eventually, after a while, people were like, they're not crazy. There's like certain people who got a hold of their journals. So they were starting, but they started reading their journals and they're like, these are intelligent people. For whatever reason, there's like obviously something wrong with them. So they start actually like trying to talk to them. So they get the girls to actually start talking. Apparently throughout all of this, they end up convincing the judge or whatever that they don't really deserve to be in jail. They say that the reason they started doing these crimes was because they saw law enforcement as like somebody who would help them. So they just kept trying to get caught so that they could get help. So eventually they get it worked out to where they're going to be released. But then a couple weeks before they're supposed to get released, their whole demeanor kind of changed. And they ended up saying that they had a new pact. And their new pact was that one of them had to die. So they decided that one of them had to die when they got released. And that was the only way that the other one could have a normal life, basically. So basically everything, you know, goes through whatever and they're getting released. Like they're getting driven to get out somewhere, I don't know. But they're in a car and they're getting driven. And then they said Jennifer kind of leans her head on her sister's shoulder and they're just sitting in the back seat. But then when they get to where they're going, Jennifer won't wake up. They found out that basically her heart just stopped. So it just stopped beating. Some people think that June killed her. Some people think that maybe there was some medication that she was taking that killed her. There was nothing found in her system. No evidence whatsoever saying she was murdered. Her heart just stopped beating. So apparently their pact came true. And now June is just living a normal life. She goes by her middle name now because she thinks that June is just, you know, there's too much history there.
June killed her.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
But there's ways to kill people without you being able to find it in their system.
Yeah, but they were both in prison, so where would she get those ways?
Somebody could
you know what I
easily
mean?
slip it.
But it's also hard. They never spoke to anybody.
Yeah, but if you write it down, you're like, hey, this is my
But you're
plan.
gonna write down, hey, give me this drug right as you're getting out of prison, and somebody's just gonna be like, yeah, sure, okay.
I mean, maybe it's like the therapist or something.
The thing, it's hard too because they were so in sync their whole lives, and they had such control over everything that they did. It's like there's a party that might think maybe it's possible that she just decided she didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah, but natural instinct does not let you kill yourself. Like,
Yeah.
you're not just gonna be able to be like, you know what, I'm gonna take one for the
Right.
team and stop breathing.
Right. There's no cause of death.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, you can't just get your body to stop functioning. And if that did happen and she's dying, they would have heard something of her struggling to breathe.
Right, but that's the thing though. She never struggled. She didn't do anything. She just went to sleep and just died.
Right, which leads you to medication.
But they couldn't find any medication in her body.
But there's medication that doesn't show up in the
That's
body.
true. And that's where it's such a weird story because there's a lot of possibilities, but the whole thing is so odd that it almost makes you want to just believe that maybe her death was odd.
Well, then I wonder, like, did something happen in their childhood and it happens to your twin and, like, they go mute, then you just make that pact of, like, okay, I won't say anything either.
I guess like what most people come to is that they had a really severe case of identity blending, which is like, if you know anything about twin psychology, a lot of twins will suffer with it, especially identical twins, because you grow up your whole life basically being like, oh, you look the same and they do everything the same. And their mother would never refer to them really by their names. She would call them the twinnies or the twins. So what they think happened is that they had such like a severe case of identity blending that they kind of just associated themselves to the same person, and they never really thought that they would grow up and be like, no, I want to be my own person. So then they grew up and realized they want to be their own person, but it was just so hard for them to get out of that mindset of like being one. They were a military family, so they moved around a lot, and every time they moved around, they would basically be like the only black family in their neighborhood, the only black kids in their school. They didn't have like other friends. So they think that that added to the identity blending because they're like, if I don't have my twin, who do I have? But yeah, when I first heard that story, I thought it was so crazy. And I would really suggest listening to the podcast that talks about it because it's very, very interesting. But yes, that's my story. So you heard my story about the silent twins, and what we decided to do is actually save Stephanie's story until next week. So next week you can come back, hear the story about the Zodiac Killer. But for this week, I hope you guys enjoyed our video. I hope you liked hearing a little bit about the silent twins. Check out that story online, Google it, and if you find anything that really was interesting to you, go ahead and put it in the comments.
If you liked it, like and subscribe. Don't forget.
Exactly.
Bye.
Thanks so much for
next
watching.
week.
See you next week on Monday or Tuesday.
Whenever you watch it.
Whenever you're here, we'll be here. Bye.